We're going on a trip in northern North Carolina along US 158. Come on, let's go. Alright everyone, today I'm going to be rebooting US Highway 158. US 158 is a child of US 58, but it has no direct access to US 58. Instead, it has indirect access via US 258. It also parallels US 58 on the North Carolina side of the North Carolina-Virginia border, and at some points comes very close to it. So let's get started with this highway. But first, you're watching the TheDerpHog, where I make highways content on all sorts of different topics. If you've been enjoying it, be sure to hit that like button, and if you've been really enjoying it, be sure to smash that subscribe button so you're notified on all future videos. And if you really want to help out the channel, become a member today, where you get custom cool emojis, early access to future videos, along with one free extra request per month. And if you don't want to become a member, you can always just pay $3 for a intersection request in future videos. Those highways will be listed down in the description below, and I'll make sure to shout you out when that video releases. So let's get on with the highway. As you can see here, this is the map of US Highway 158. It starts at a junction here with US 601 and 64 in Mocksville, North Carolina, and ends all the way out here on the coast at a junction with North Carolina 12 and US 64 in the Outer Banks area. And the green part of the route is the route that I've been on. So with that, we're going to be talking about eastbound US 158. So we begin here at the US 601 and 64 junction here in Mocksville, and we get a US 158 East shield here. And here's our first reassurance shield as we're heading through downtown Mocksville. And on the outskirts of Mocksville, we're now meeting North Carolina Highway 801, and you can take 801 over to Interstate 40, because as of right now, we're paralleling the highway. In fact, here's a picture of Interstate 40 on the other side of this creek here. And once we get into the Winston-Salem area, now I'm meeting Interstate 40 itself, which gets the westbound control city of Statesville, boo, and the eastbound control city of Greensboro, yay! Here I'm meeting the Silas Creek Parkway, or North Carolina 67, and we get no control cities for it. And now we're going to be joining with US Highway 421, as 421 and US 158 have a concurrency here. And as we're getting onto the ramp, we now have a 2 US 52 shield. US Highway 52 once again, and it just gets the same control cities as northbound US 421. And here's where US 158 is splitting off from US 421. And this way, exit 228 does not need a 2 US 158 East exit, because it's literally right here. Once we split off from US 421, we're now meeting future Interstate 74. And we actually get a control city for ourselves and none for 74 right now. Let's see what we're signed for on 74, just for a cool look. Are you kidding me? We're getting the Kentucky treatment for Reedsville Road? You can just take off that road and just do Reedsville. Here we're meeting North Carolina Highway 66, and let's see what we're signed for on 66. Are you kidding me? Why are we signed for Stokesdale? What happened to Reedsville? North Carolina is being inconsistent once again. That's why the NC and NC dot stands for no consistency. In our next mileage time, we get Stokesdale on the bottom line at 10 miles away. Are you kidding me? Here in Stokesdale, we're now getting Yanceyville as our bottom line control city at 44 miles away, which I think is an alright choice because you meet North Carolina 86 there. And then here I'm meeting Interstate 73 and US Highway 220 just outside of Stokesdale. Here in the Reedsville area, now meeting North Carolina 87 and US 29 Business, as we're going to be joining with them. And here I'm meeting US 29 proper, and we're now signed north for Danville. Here's where US 158 splits off from US 29, as it's now signed east for Yanceyville. And Eden is there because of North Carolina 14. Here in the Yanceyville area, now meeting North Carolina 86, and we're going to be joining with 86 south to head towards Roxboro and Hillsboro. In fact, we get both Roxboro and Hillsboro on our next mileage time. And here is where 158 is splitting off from North Carolina 86 to head towards Roxboro. Wow, North Carolina is making a huge jump here. Now we're signed for Henderson at 55 miles away. Here in the Roxborough area, meaning US Highway 501, and it looks like NCDOT is trying to copy NDOT here because they abbreviated South the same way as they did for South Sioux City in Nebraska. But we're going to be joining with 501 South here to head towards Durham. And here on the outskirts of Roxborough, US 158 splits off from 501, and let's see what we're signed for. Oh, we're still signed for Henderson at 37 miles away. But here in the Oxford area, we're now in US Highway 15. And as we're heading towards Henderson, we're now meeting Interstate 85. And 85 is signed north for Henderson. No, since we're already basically in Henderson, this should be Richmond or Petersburg. No need for Henderson. I bet people are just going to be staying on 158 to head towards Henderson. There's no need to get onto 85 to go over one exit just to get to Henderson. Oh my goodness, NCDOT. Ah. But luckily that southbound control city is awesome. Our next mileage sign, we're now getting Norlina on the bottom line at 21 miles away. I think that's alright because we made US 401 there. And a little bit up the road, we're now joining with Interstate 85, and it better be signed north for Petersburg at this point. And here's where US 158 splits off from Interstate 85 and sadly hits no control city. Now we're meeting US Highway 1, and 1 north is going to be joining with us, but 1 south is signed for Raleigh, which is a great choice. And our next mileage time, we get both US 1 control cities. We get Norlina on the top line at 12 miles away, and South Hill on the bottom line at 34. No, this should be Richmond, like how you do it with the 401 and 1 concurrency. This should be South Hill and Richmond. Or if you want to pull a Virginia, do Norlina, South Hill, Richmond. Richmond needs to be on here! And here's where US 401 is going to be joining with US 158. And they're signed for Warrenton. While 401 North is going to be joining with US 1 as they head north towards South Hill. No, that should be Richmond. Here's where US 401 splits off from US 158 as it's signed for Warrenton. And we're now signed for Macon, North Carolina. I don't even know where that is, and I live in this state. Now they're just signing, what, like random small towns? And our next mileage sign, after splitting off from US 401, we get Littleton on the bottom line 11 miles away. Again, I don't even know where that is. And apparently it's very little. The only reason they're probably signing it is because of NC 4903. No, this should be Roanoke Rapids. You meet Interstate 95 in Roanoke Rapids. You don't need anything important in Littleton. Plus, Littleton's very little. So what are you doing here, NCDOT? This should be Roanoke Rapids in Littleton, not Macon in Littleton. No one's going to Macon, North Carolina. I can't with this. Here in Littleton, we're meeting North Carolina 903 and North Carolina 4. Are you happy now, North Carolina? And still in the Littleton area, now getting Roanoke Rapids on the top line at 16 miles away and Weldon at 19. But this is alright. I mean, Elizabeth City is a bit too far to sign, but since we're meeting US 301 in Weldon, you can do it like Emporia for 301 instead of just Weldon itself. Now we're meeting North Carolina Highway 48, and as you can see, we're now getting A2 Interstate 95 shield with US 158. Here in the Roanoke Rapids area, we're actually passing by 2 of my favorite places. We're passing by Sheetz and a cookout. Yay! And now we're being Interstate 95, which gets signed south for Rocky Mount, which I think is a rocky choice. I'd rather see Raleigh on there or Fayetteville. And then for northbound 95, it's signed for Emporia and Richmond. And now we're meeting US Highway 301 in Weldon, and 301 and 158 have a concurrency here. Here's where 158 splits off from US Highway 301, as 301 is now heading north towards Emporia and Richmond, 158 is going to be heading east towards Elizabeth City and the Outer Banks. With our next mileage time, we get Murfreesboro on the bottom line at 29 miles away, which I think is an alright choice. You meet US 258 there. And then outside the Jackson area, you're now getting Conway on the top line at 12 miles away, and Murfreesboro on the bottom line at 19. Here in Conway, we're still signed for Murfreesboro. Here in the Murfreesboro area, 158 and 258 are going to have a sibling concurrency here. And our next mileage time, we get Winston on the top line at 12 miles away and Elizabeth City on the bottom line at 60. Yay! Here is where 258 is splitting off from 158 as it's signed south for a Hosky, and 158 gets no control city here. Now we mean US Highway 13 just outside of Winton. Here's where US 158 is splitting off from US 13 as it's heading towards Elizabeth City now. In fact, we get Elizabeth City on the top line at 27 miles away, and we get Nags Head at 83, which is the eastern terminus of US 158. Here in the Elizabeth City-ish area, we're meeting US Highway 17. Yay, US 17! And our next mileage time, we get Elizabeth City on the top line. Nags Head is where US 158 is going. And then Williamston is where US 17 is going. So this is a good sign here. Here is where US 17 is splitting off from US 17 bypass. And I believe US 17 bypass is going to become Interstate 87. And here is where US 158 is splitting off from US 17 as it heads into downtown Elizabeth City and towards the coast. In our next mileage time, we get Manteo on the bottom line at 65 miles away. Here, just outside of the Outer Banks, we're now meeting North Carolina Highway 168, which is going to become Virginia 168 and takes you up to Norfolk. And our next mileage time, we get still Nags Head on the bottom line at 42 miles away, which isn't. Here we're crossing over a causeway over to the Outer Banks. Here in the Outer Banks area, we get a whole bunch of different information. We get information for North Carolina Highway 12 and North Carolina Highway 158 and a rest area. Wow. Here is a cool sight to see, the Wrights Brother Memorial. And now we're at the eastern terminus of US Highway 158, and the only thing that it's telling us that we're now going to become US Highway 64. So with that, we're going to be turning around and doing westbound US 158. So we begin here on US 64. We're now going to be turning into US Highway 158 West. We're getting 4 control cities here. We're getting Kill Devil Hills, Kitty Hawk, Southern Shores, and Duck. In fact, if we further up the road, we're now getting a US 158 reassurance shield. And here in the Outer Banks, we're actually paralleling North Carolina Highway 12 here, which is pretty cool. And now we're meeting North Carolina Highway 12, and US 158 is now signed west for Elizabeth City and Norfolk, which are good choices. Here we're crossing over the same causeway back into the mainland of North Carolina. And here we're meeting North Carolina Highway 168 once again, and this is where 158 is going to be heading west towards Elizabeth City. Here is downtown Elizabeth City. On the other side of downtown, we're now meeting up with US Highway 17 once again. Here is where US 158 is splitting off from US Highway 17. Here in one of these small towns, we're meeting North Carolina Highway 32. And sadly, they don't give us any information for US 158 here. But at the next random intersection, we're now signed west for Winton. I'd rather see Roanoke Rapids there instead of Winton. Here we're meeting US Highway 13, and 13 and 158 are going to have a concurrency here. And here in our next mileage time, we get 2 cities for US Highway 13. The Huskies are alright choice. Here is where US 158 is splitting off from US Highway 13, as it's now signed for Murfreesboro. For our next mileage time, we get Murfreesboro on the top line at 10 miles away and Roanoke Rapids on the bottom line. Yippee! Now we're meeting US Highway 258 once again, and we're now going to have a sibling concurrency. Here is where US 258 is splitting off from US 158, as 158 is now heading west towards Roanoke Rapids. Here in Weldon, we're now meeting with US Highway 301. And here is where US 158 splits off from US 301 as it's heading towards downtown Weldon and Roanoke Rapids. Here is a alright shot of downtown Weldon. And now we're meeting Interstate 95 here in the Roanoke Rapids area. And here in the Roanoke Rapids, I want to point out this Cracker Barrel because I've been there one time when I was visiting Roanoke Rapids. And then outside of the Roanoke Rapids area, we're getting Littleton as our secondary, which they should have done on eastbound, and Warrenton on the bottom at 26 miles away. And Lake Gaston is an afterthought here with a up arrow. And outside of Littleton, we're now getting Macon on the top line and Norlina on the bottom line. Alright. Here is where 158 becomes a bypass and a business route. The business route is signed for Warrenton, while the bypass route is signed for Norlina. In fact, once here on the bypass route, we're now signed for Henderson on the bottom line at 21 miles away. Here on meeting US Highway 401 and 401 and 158 are going to have a currency as we head towards Norlina. Here on meeting US Highway 1 in Norlina, and it looks like that 401 is going to be joining with US 1 North, while 158 is going to be joining with US 1 South. And we also have a 2 Interstate 85 shield here, and it's signed for both directions. Yes, I know you can get to Interstate 85 in both directions, but this is kind of confusing. You can just do it either for one highway or just do it not at all, because I actually looked it up and it's kind of the same time to get to Interstate 85 depending on which direction you take. So if I was me, I would just take away that Interstate 85 shield altogether. Here is where US 1 splits off from US 158 after joining up with it in Norlina. And then here in the Henderson area, 158 is now going to be joining with Interstate 85 South. Here is where 158 splits off from Interstate 85 and it's signed south for Oxford and Durham, which are good choices. While 158 gets a 2 Dabney Drive. Are you kidding me? No, that should have a control city there. 158 West should be Roxborough, not Dabney Drive. On our next mileage chart, we get Roxborough on the bottom line at 30 miles away. Here meaning Interstate 85, and I don't want to show the control cities again because that Henderson just makes me mad. And then here is meaning US Highway 15 in the Oxford area. Now in the Roxborough area, we're now meeting with US Highway 501, and we're now going to be congruent with 501 North towards South Boston. Here is where US 158 splits off from US 501. And now our next mileage time, we get Yanceyville on the top line at 7 miles away, and Winston-Salem on the bottom line at 72. Wow, this is one rare NC.W. Here in Yanceyville, we're meeting North Carolina Highway 86. And then this is where North Carolina 86 splits off from US 158, as 158 is now heading west towards Reedsville. In fact, we get Reedsville on the top line at 21 miles away, and Winston-Salem is now 63. Here remaining US Highway 29 and 29 and 158 have a concurrency here as we bypass Reedsville. And here is the exit where 158 splits off from US 29, as now we're signed for Reedsville and Burlington. And once we split off from North Carolina 87, we get Stokesdale on the top line at 21 miles away and Winston-Salem on the bottom line at 40. Here are meeting Interstate 73 and US 220 just outside of Stokesdale. Now we're meeting North Carolina Highway 74, or future Interstate 74. just outside of Winston-Salem. And here is where US 158 is feeding into US 421 North. And now remaining US Highway 52, which is signed north for Mount Airy, which is a great choice. And 52 South is signed for Lexington. I'd say that is a alright choice, but since 52 is also concurrent with 85, you can sign 52 South for Charlotte. That's an option. Here is where US 158 is splitting off from US 421, and it gets the Kentucky treatment here in downtown Winston-Salem. How about instead of Stratford Road South, how about you do Moxville, because that's where US 158 ends. And then after splitting off from US Highway 421, we're now meeting Interstate 40, which probably got the same control cities as it did on eastbound 158. And then just outside of Winston-Salem, we're now getting Moxville as our next control city, which is a good choice because that's where 158 terminates, and it's at 11 miles away. And then 11 miles up the road, we're now terminating at US 64 and US Highway 601, and this is where US 158 ends. Personally, since US 158 just terminates at US 64 on both ends, why isn't it not a child route of US 64? That would make way more sense than it being a child route of US 158. So with that, we're going to be ending US 158 and moving on to, the places I'll go. So these are all the places I'd visit if I ever was on US 158. First, I would like to visit Moxville, North Carolina. And then since I've already been to Winston-Salem to go to a football game, I'd like to actually visit downtown Winston-Salem instead of just the Wake Forest football stadium. And after that, I'd like to visit Roxborough and Henderson. And then I'd love to revisit Roanoke Rapids. And I also like to visit Elizabeth City and all of its attractions there. And then finally, I've never been to the Outer Banks, so I'd love to go there and visit all the attractions it has to offer. And that ends US Highway 158. Thank y'all so much for watching this short video on US Highway 158. I hope you guys enjoyed the reboot version, and I hope you also got mad at North Carolina's inconsistency. So with that, here are my next few highways. Next week I'm going to be doing US Highway 17 southbound, and then since I hit 555 subscribers, I promise I'll do a Arkansas Highway 555 video. And after that, I'm going to be heading to Dublin, Ireland, where I'm going to be doing Motor Highway 50. And then after that, I'm going to be doing US Highway 27 northbound only for Florida State University. And then after that, I'm going to be doing US Highway 63 northbound for the University of Missouri. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all next week.